The Terran scout ship spun wildly through the dark sky, flames trailing behind as it plummeted toward the war-torn surface below. Ethan Voss gritted his teeth, his hands tight on the controls. Warnings flashed across his screen. Engine failure, hull breach, critical damage. Nothing he did could stop the descent. With a final explosion, the ship crashed into the barren wasteland of Varkan 6, a contested planet caught between two warring alien factions. Ethan barely had time to unbuckle before the emergency hatch blew open, and he tumbled onto the rocky ground, coughing from the smoke. Pain shot through his ribs, but he pushed himself up. His mission was simple: reconnaissance. Get in, gather data on the Carey Empire, and get out. Now his ship was in pieces, and he was stranded in enemy territory. Before he could think of a plan, a deep guttural sound reached his ears. He turned and froze. A squad of Carey warriors stood at the edge of the wreckage, their dark armor reflecting the faint glow of fires from his broken ship. The Carey were tall, strong, and built for war, with sharp features and piercing eyes that glowed faintly in the dim light. At the front stood Captain Xilara. She was taller than the rest, her armor marked with the insignia of a high-ranking officer. A large energy rifle rested in her grip, but she didn't fire. Instead, she studied him with an expression he couldn't read. Ethan slowly raised his hands, heart pounding. I don't want trouble." One of the warriors growled something in their alien tongue. Another lifted his weapon. Xilara held up a hand, stopping them. She stepped forward, her heavy boots crunching against the dirt. "Terran pilot," she said, her voice firm but controlled. "You are the enemy." Ethan swallowed hard. "I didn't come here to fight." A second warrior sneered. "Then why are you here?" Ethan hesitated. If he told the truth, they might kill him. If he lied, they'd see through it. Crash-landed, he finally said. "I was on a scouting mission. My ship got hit." The warriors exchanged glances. Xilara studied him for a long moment. "The law is clear," another warrior said. "Humans do not leave this world alive." Ethan's stomach twisted. He had no weapon, no way to defend himself. If they opened fire, he was done for. Silara's grip tightened on her rifle. Then, to Ethan's shock, she lowered it. "No," she said. "This one is mine." The warriors stiffened. One protested. "Captain, you." She cut him off. "I saved him. That makes him my responsibility." Ethan's breath caught. Saved him. He didn't understand. She hadn't shot him yet, but that didn't mean he was safe. A tense silence hung between the soldiers. Then one of them turned away with an irritated grunt. The others followed, leaving Ethan alone with Xilara. She motioned toward the wreckage. "Take what you can carry. You will come with me." Ethan hesitated. "And if I refuse?" Her eyes narrowed. "Then you die here." That wasn't much of a choice. With no other options, he gathered what little he could. A small survival kit, a damaged communicator, and a knife. Then he followed her into the unknown. As they walked through the harsh, rocky terrain, Ethan's mind raced with questions. Why had she spared him? What did she mean by responsibility? He had a sinking feeling that his fate was no longer in his own hands. And worse, he wasn't sure if that was a good thing or not. Ethan followed Captain Xilara through the rough terrain, his boots crunching against the dry, rocky ground. The twin moons of Varkan 6 hung in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the wasteland. His body ached from the crash, but he kept moving, because stopping wasn't an option. His mind raced with questions. Why had she spared him? He had heard stories about the Carey, fierce warriors, strict laws, no mercy for humans. And yet, here he was, still alive. The silence between them stretched until Ethan finally spoke. "Where are you taking me?" Xilara didn't slow down. "To my outpost." "That doesn't sound good." She glanced at him. "It is better than the alternative." Ethan knew what she meant. If the other Carey had their way, he would be dead already. Still, he wasn't sure if walking into an enemy stronghold was much better. After an hour of walking, they reached a massive rock formation. Scifi pressed her hand to a hidden panel, and a metallic door slid open, revealing an underground passage, a hidden base. Ethan hesitated. "And if I don't go in?" Scifi turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "Then you die out here." She had a habit of making things sound simple. With a sigh, Ethan stepped inside. The door shut behind him with a soft hiss. A dangerous welcome. The base was smaller than he expected, built into the rock with metal walls and dim lighting. The air smelled of machinery and something faintly metallic. As they walked deeper inside, Carry soldiers turned to stare. Some whispered, others glared. Ethan could feel their hostility. They didn't want him here. A large Carry warrior stepped into their path. His armor was thicker than the others, his face lined with scars. His eyes locked onto Ethan with clear disgust. "This is a mistake, Captain," the warrior said. "The humans are the enemy." Scifi stood firm. "I saved him." The warrior's eyes darkened. "That means nothing." "The law. The law says he is mine now." Scifi interrupted, her voice sharp. "Or do you question Carry tradition?" The warrior hesitated, then let out a low growl. He stepped aside, though the hatred in his eyes remained. Ethan exhaled slowly. This just got worse. A life ode. Inside Scifi's private quarters, Ethan sat on a metal bench, trying to make sense of everything. "You saved me," he said, rubbing his temples. "Why?" Scifi leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Carry law states that if a warrior spares an enemy, that enemy becomes their responsibility. They're bonded. Ethan frowned. "Bonded. It means you are under my protection," she said, "but also my burden. If you disobey me, if you betray me, my honor is at risk." Ethan let that sink in. She wasn't just protecting him. She was stuck with him. "So what now?" he asked. "You will follow my orders." He snorted. "Yeah, and if I refuse?" Scifi's gaze hardened. "Then I will no longer be responsible for your life." The meaning was clear. If he disobeyed, she wouldn't stop the others from killing him. Ethan exhaled. "Great, so I'm a prisoner." She shook her head. "A prisoner has no choice. You do." He wasn't sure he believed that. But for now, staying close to Scifi seemed like his best chance of survival. A silent war. Over the next few days, Ethan tried to adjust. The Carry didn't trust him. They watched his every move, waiting for an excuse to get rid of him. He ate in silence, avoided trouble, and kept his head down. But he couldn't stay invisible forever. One morning, as he walked through the training hall, he heard voices arguing. "He doesn't belong here," one soldier spat. "He should prove himself," another said. Ethan stopped. The scared warrior from before, the one who had challenged Scifi, was watching him with a cruel smile. "Human," he said, "you claim to be worthy of the captain's protection. Then fight." Ethan looked around. Carry warriors gathered, waiting for his response. Scifi stepped forward, her expression unreadable. "Ethan does not need to fight." The warrior smirked. "Afraid he'll die." Ethan clenched his jaw. He wasn't a soldier, but he wasn't a coward either. If he backed down, they would never accept him. "Fine," he said, stepping forward. "Let's do this." The warriors laughed, but Scifi watched in silence. As Ethan raised his fists, he realized something. If he wanted to survive, he had to prove he wasn't weak. And this fight was just the beginning. The training hall fell silent as Ethan Voss stepped forward. Carry warriors surrounded the open space, their glowing eyes fixed on him. Some smirked, others whispered, but none of them believed he had a chance. Across from him stood Vorak, the scared warrior who had challenged him. Vorak was massive, his muscles like coiled steel beneath his dark armor. He cracked his knuckles and grinned. You should have stayed in the captain's shadow, human, Vorak said. Now, I will show you why you don't belong here. Ethan clenched his fists. He wasn't a fighter, not like the Carry. But backing down wasn't an option. If he ran, they'd never respect him. Captain Silera stood nearby, arms crossed. Her face was unreadable. Would she stop this if it got out of hand? Ethan wasn't sure. The moment the fight began, Vorak lunged. Ethan barely dodged as a massive fist swung past his head. He stumbled backward, heart pounding. Vorak was fast, too fast. The Carry warrior attacked again, this time landing a blow to Ethan's ribs. Pain exploded in his side, and he gasped. Laughter erupted from the watching soldiers. Ethan gritted his teeth. Stay down, and they'll never take you seriously. Get up, and they might respect you. He forced himself to his feet. Vorak's smirk faded slightly. Still standing, Vorak scoffed. Impressive, but pointless. Ethan didn't reply. He studied Vorak's stance, his movements. The Carry relied on brute force, using their superior strength. But strength isn't everything. Vorak charged again, but this time, Ethan sidestepped and kicked at the back of Vorak's knee. The warrior staggered, surprised. The crowd murmured. The human had landed a hit. Vorak roared, furious now. He came at Ethan harder, but Ethan was ready. He ducked, weaved, avoided most of the blows. He couldn't win with power, but he could last longer than they expected. A final strike sent him to the ground, pain radiating through his body. Vorak stood over him, breathing hard. You fought well, for a human. Ethan wiped the blood from his lip and smirked. You hit like a training dummy. Silence. Then, laughter. Some of the Carry warriors nodded in approval. Vorak extended a hand. Ethan hesitated, then took it. Silera stepped forward. Enough. She looked at Ethan, her gaze unreadable. You fought with courage. That is noted. It wasn't much, but it was something. A small victory. Later, Ethan sat in the dim barracks, his body aching. He pressed a cold cloth against his bruised ribs. Silera entered, standing near the doorway. You made an impression today. Ethan smirked. That a good thing? She tilted her head. Better than being seen as weak. He studied her. You knew this would happen, didn't you? She didn't answer. That told him enough. Ethan sighed. So what now? Am I one of your soldiers? Silera shook her head. No, you are still an outsider. But they will tolerate you. For now. It wasn't much, but it was progress. Before she left, Ethan asked, why do your people hate humans so much? Silera paused. Then she said, because your kind took everything from us. And with that, she walked away. Ethan stared after her, the weight of her words settling in his chest. He had a feeling that this war was bigger than he had ever understood. Ethan sat alone in the dimly lit barracks, his body aching from the fight with Vorak. The bruises on his ribs throbbed, but that wasn't what bothered him most. Silera's words echoed in his mind. Because your kind took everything from us. He had to know what she meant. Pushing himself to his feet, he winced but made his way through the quiet corridors of the underground base. The Carry still watched him with suspicion, but no one stopped him. Not after today. He found Silera in a small command room, studying a holographic map of the planet. Her armor was off, revealing a sleeveless dark tunic. The dim blue light from the screen cast sharp shadows across her face. She didn't look at him. You should rest. Ethan ignored that. What did you mean earlier? Silera finally met his gaze, her expression unreadable. You heard me. Yeah, but I don't understand. The war between humans and the Carry, it's just territory, resources, right? Her jaw tightened. Is that what they tell you? Ethan hesitated. He wasn't a soldier, just a scout. He had never seen the full war. Silera turned off the hologram. Do you know why we fight? Ethan swallowed. Because both sides want control of the outer worlds. She shook her head. No, because your people took our home. Ethan frowned. That's not. But he stopped himself, because honestly, he didn't know if it was true or not. Celara stepped closer. The Carrie once lived on a world called Zerith 4. It was green, beautiful. Our cities stood for centuries. Then the Terran fleets arrived. They called it an unclaimed planet. They burned our homes, forced us to flee. Ethan's breath caught. He had never heard of this. Your leaders say we are violent, that we attack without reason. Celara's voice was steady, but he could hear the restrained anger beneath it. But we only fight because we have nothing left. Ethan looked away. He wanted to deny it, to say humans weren't like that. But deep down, he wasn't sure. Finally, he met her gaze. So why save me? Celara exhaled slowly. Because not all humans are the same. The word hung between them, heavy with meaning. Ethan didn't know what to say. A mission of no return. Before Ethan could process everything, a loud alarm blared through the base. The walls vibrated slightly as distant explosions echoed outside. Celara snapped into action. We're under attack. Ethan followed her out into the main hall. Carrie warriors were rushing to grab weapons. Vorak barked orders, his usual hostility toward Ethan forgotten in the urgency of the moment. What's happening? Ethan asked. Celara grabbed her rifle. Terran strike team. They found the base. Ethan's stomach dropped. His own people were attacking, but they didn't know he was here. We have to leave, Celara said. The tunnels will get us out. Before they could move, a Carrie soldier ran up, wounded and gasping for breath. They've blocked the exits. Celara cursed. They're trying to wipe us out. Ethan's mind raced. He knew Terran attack patterns, small teams, precise strikes, taking out leadership first. They'll come for this command room soon, Ethan said. If we stay, we die. Celara's eyes flickered with thought. Then she made a decision. Vorak, take the warriors. Hold them at the main hall. Ethan and I will find another way out. Vorak scowled, but nodded. We'll buy you time. Ethan turned to Celara. You trust me that much? She looked at him. I don't trust you, human. Then, after a pause, she added, but I trust my decision to spare you. Ethan couldn't argue with that. The enemy you know. Moving quickly, Ethan and Celara navigated the dark corridors. The walls shook with every explosion. Gunfire echoed from the hall behind them. Then, voices ahead. Ethan pressed himself against the wall. He knew those voices. Terran soldiers. Celara pointed to a vent above. We go through there. Ethan nodded. As he climbed, he heard a familiar voice from below. Commander Rains, the man who had trained him. Secure the base, Rains ordered. If the Carrie captain is still alive, capture her. If not, burn everything. Ethan's hands clenched. His own people wanted to wipe out everyone here. Celara touched his arm. We keep moving. For the first time, Ethan wasn't sure where his loyalty truly lay, and he had a feeling he'd have to choose, soon. The metal vent was cramped and dark, but Ethan forced himself forward. Celara moved silently ahead of him, her body tense, every movement precise. Below them, the voices of Terran soldiers echoed through the corridors. Ethan's heart pounded. He knew these men, the same soldiers he once worked with. If they found him here, standing beside a Carrie captain, they wouldn't hesitate. To them, he was already a traitor. Celara suddenly stopped. She pointed to a grate ahead, whispering, exit point. Ethan nodded. They had to move fast. The enemy's plan. Carefully, Ethan peered through the grate. Below was a storage room, mostly empty, except for a small group of Terran soldiers gathered around a holomap. His breath caught when he saw Commander Rains. Base is nearly secured, one soldier reported. We've eliminated most of the Carrie forces. The survivors are retreating. Rains studied the map. Good. But I want Captain Silura alive. Ethan's stomach twisted. Another soldier spoke up. Why not eliminate her? Rains smirked. Because she knows where the last Carey stronghold is. She's the key to ending this war. Ethan's mind raced. If they captured Silura, they wouldn't just kill her. They'd use her, break her, force her to give up her people. He turned to her, whispering, "They want you alive." Silura's expression didn't change. "Then we must ensure they fail." Ethan exhaled. He had a choice to make. Stay silent and let his people win, or help Silura escape and betray everything he once stood for. Deep down, he already knew the answer. The Great Escape. Ethan motioned to Silura. "Follow me." They crawled further, reaching a side tunnel that led to an abandoned control room. The base was falling apart. Smoke filled the air, and distant explosions shook the walls. Silura looked at him. What now? Ethan scanned the consoles. One still had power. We create a distraction. Hacking into the system, he overrode the internal security alarms, triggering emergency lockdown in several sectors. Immediately, red warning lights flashed, and a robotic voice echoed through the base. "Alert! Reactor breach detected. Evacuate immediately." Confusion erupted in the corridors. Ethan could hear Terran soldiers shouting, their focus shifting to the false emergency. Silura raised an eyebrow. "Impressive." Ethan smirked. "We're not out yet." Betrayal in the dark. Moving quickly, they made their way to the last escape tunnel. The air smelled of smoke and metal, and the sounds of battle faded behind them. Then, a voice stopped them. "Ethan." He turned. Commander Rains stood at the entrance of the tunnel, gun raised. Ethan's heart pounded. "Step away from her," Rains ordered. "Now." Silura tensed beside him. She was fast, but not faster than a bullet. Ethan swallowed. "Rains, listen to me." "Listen to you." Rains laughed coldly. "I should have known. You always had a soft heart, but betraying your own kind, that's a new low." Ethan clenched his fists. "You don't understand. We started this war. We took their home." Rains shook his head. "That's the price of survival, Ethan. Humanity comes first." Ethan's chest tightened. That was the problem. Before Rains could react, Silura moved. In a blur, she knocked the gun from his hand, kicking him hard in the chest. Rains crashed against the wall, stunned. Ethan grabbed his weapon, aiming it at his former commander. His hands trembled. Rains stared at him. "Are you really going to do this?" Ethan's mind raced. He could still walk away. He could still return to his people. But when he looked at Silura, the warrior who had spared him, trusted him, he knew there was no going back. Ethan took a deep breath. And then he fired. A new beginning. Rains wasn't dead. Ethan had aimed at the wall beside him. But the warning shot was enough. Silura grabbed Ethan's arm. "We have to go." They disappeared into the tunnel, leaving behind the war they no longer belonged to. As they stepped into the cool night air, Ethan felt something he hadn't in a long time. Freedom. The cold night air stung Ethan's face as he and Silura emerged from the tunnel into the rocky wilderness. Smoke and fire burned behind them, the underground Carey base now a battlefield. The sounds of gunfire and explosions echoed in the distance, but they had escaped for now. Silura pressed a hand to her side. She was injured, a deep cut along her ribs. She had taken a hit while fighting off Terran soldiers in the tunnels. Ethan stepped closer. "Let me see." Silura shook her head. "Not now. We need to keep moving." He couldn't argue. They weren't safe yet. Ethan glanced up at the sky. The Terran warships still hovered above, their lights scanning the ground like hunting beasts. The enemy wouldn't stop until they were caught. Silura pointed to the east. "There's a hidden transport ship beyond those cliffs. If we reach it, we can escape." Ethan nodded. Then let's go. Hunted. They moved fast, keeping to the shadows. The rocky terrain was rough, but Ethan's boots had already been worn down from his time in the carry base. He was used to the harsh landscape now. But soon they heard them. Terran soldiers. Close. Ethan and Silara ducked behind a boulder as a squad of 5 soldiers marched through the valley below. Their helmets gleamed under the moonlight, their rifles held tight. Ethan's stomach twisted when he saw the leader. Lieutenant Garin, another familiar face, another man he had once fought beside. "We need to take them out," Silara whispered, quietly. Ethan hesitated. "They're my people." Silara's voice was calm but firm. "They will kill us." Ethan exhaled. She was right. He gripped his stolen rifle. He didn't want to kill them, but he wasn't going to die for them either. The silent battle. Silara moved first. Fast, deadly, precise. Before Garen's squad even noticed, she was already behind one of them, her knife flashing in the darkness. Ethan fired his rifle, shooting the soldier closest to him in the leg. The man went down with a muffled cry. 2 left. Garen turned, raising his weapon, but Ethan moved first. He slammed his rifle against Garen's arm, knocking the gun away. For a moment, their eyes met. Ethan. Garen gasped. Disbelief. Shock. Betrayal. Ethan hesitated. That moment almost cost him. But Silara didn't hesitate. She struck Garen hard across the head, knocking him unconscious. Silence fell. The fight was over. Ethan stood over Garen's body, breathing hard. His hands shook. "He was my friend," Ethan whispered. Silara placed a hand on his shoulder. "I know." They didn't have time for guilt. More soldiers would come. "Let's move," Silara said. Ethan took one last look at Garen before following her into the night. The final stand. They'd reached the cliffs just as dawn touched the horizon. A small carry transport ship sat hidden among the rocks. Relief flooded Ethan. They had made it. But as they ran toward the ship, a deafening roar filled the air. A Terran gunship descended from the sky, its engines shaking the ground. The side doors slid open, revealing Commander Rains standing at the edge, his gun aimed straight at Ethan. Ethan froze. "Don't do this," Rains called out. "Come back. You don't belong with them." Silara raised her weapon, but Ethan stopped her. This was his fight. Ethan stepped forward. "I made my choice." Rains' jaw clenched. "Then you're a fool." The gunship's mounted cannons powered up, ready to fire. Ethan had seconds to act. And then he saw it. The weak spot. A fuel tank on the gunship's side, partially exposed. A single shot would take it out. Silara noticed too. She gave Ethan a quick glance. She would cover him. Without another word, Ethan dived for cover as Silara opened fire. The gunship's cannons blazed, but she was fast, moving like a shadow. Ethan took aim. His heart pounded. One shot. One chance. He pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the fuel tank. A chain reaction erupted, flames bursting from the side of the gunship. Rain's eyes widened in shock as the ship lurched sideways, spiraling toward the ground. Ethan turned away as the explosion ripped through the valley. Then, silence. A new path. Ethan and Silara climbed aboard the transport ship. As the engines roared to life, Ethan took one last look at the burning wreckage below. Silara stood beside him. "You didn't have to do this." Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "I did." She studied him for a moment, then nodded. The ship lifted off, rising toward the sky. Ethan didn't know what waited for him beyond this war. But for the first time, he was free. The stars stretched endlessly as Ethan and Silara's stolen transport ship soared through the void. The battle behind them was over, but the war wasn't. Not yet. Ethan sat in the co-pilot's seat, watching the planet shrink in the distance, his home. Or at least it used to be. Now he had no idea where he belonged. Celera piloted the ship in silence. The soft glow of the control panel lit her face, her expression calm but focused. She had flown through countless battles, but this was different. This time, she had something to lose. Ethan exhaled and turned toward her. So, where do we go now? She didn't look away from the stars. There's a hidden carry base deep in the asteroid belt. My people are gathering there for a final stand. Ethan frowned. A final stand? Against the Terrans? Celera nodded. Your forces won't stop until my kind is gone. We have nowhere left to run. Ethan leaned back in his seat, his mind racing. He had spent years believing humanity was right, that they were the victims, that they were fighting for survival. But after everything he had seen, after everything he had done, he knew the truth. This war wasn't about survival. It was about conquest. And now he had to make another choice. A call from the past. A sudden beep from the console broke the silence. Celera tensed. Incoming transmission. Ethan leaned forward. From who? She hesitated before pressing a button. The screen flickered to life. A face appeared. Commander Rains. Ethan's stomach twisted. Rains was alive. The older man's face was burned from the gunship explosion, and his eyes held a cold fury. Ethan, he said, voice heavy with disappointment. I should have known you wouldn't stay dead. Ethan clenched his jaw. You should have left me behind. Rains ignored him. Turn the ship around. This is your last chance. Ethan exhaled sharply. I'm not coming back. Rains shook his head. You're making a mistake. We're not the villains, Ethan. You were one of us. You can still fix this. Ethan's heart pounded. A part of him wanted to believe Rains, but the truth was clear now. There was no fixing this. There was no going back. I have fixed it, Ethan said. By leaving. Rains' expression darkened. Then you're the enemy. The transmission cut off. Celera's fingers tightened around the controls. They'll come for us. Ethan nodded. He had known that the moment he pulled the trigger back on the battlefield. But he wasn't afraid anymore. The final battle. Alarms blared across the ship. Enemy signatures detected. Celera cursed under her breath. They're fast. Ethan checked the radar. A Terran warship was closing in, flanked by a squad of fighter drones. We can't outrun them, Celera said. Ethan's mind raced. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but not out of options. He turned to Celera. Can you get us close to the asteroid field? She blinked. You want to fly through an asteroid field? That's suicide. Ethan smirked. Only if you're bad at flying. Celera snorted, but a small smile tugged at her lips. Strap in. She pushed the thrusters to full power, diving toward the massive cluster of floating rocks and debris. The enemy ships followed, weapons lighting up the void with gunfire. Ethan grabbed the co-pilot's controls, adjusting the ship's trajectory. They'd weave between the asteroids, narrowly dodging the blasts. One of the enemy drones miscalculated. It smashed into a rock, exploding on impact. Ethan grinned. That's one down. Celera's movements were sharp, precise. She twisted the ship through the chaos, using the debris as cover. More enemy ships crashed, unable to match her skill. But the warship was still behind them. Celera glanced at Ethan. If you have a plan, now's the time. He checked the sensors. One of the asteroids ahead had a high metal concentration, dense enough to block their ship from detection. Get us behind that rock, Ethan said. Celera didn't question him. She dived toward the massive asteroid, cutting the engines at the last second. The ship drifted silently, hidden in the asteroid's shadow. The Terran warship rushed past, still searching. Ethan held his breath. Seconds passed. Then, the warship turned away. They lost us, Celera whispered. Ethan let out a slow exhale. We're safe. For now. A new future. The ship drifted through space, silent once more. Celera turned to Ethan. You saved us. He shook his head. No, we saved each other. She studied him for a moment before nodding. The Carrie will welcome you, but are you ready for that life? Ethan looked out at the stars. He had lost his old life, but maybe, just maybe, he had found a new one. I'm ready, he said. Celara smiled. For the first time, they weren't just running. They were fighting for something worth believing in. The stars stretched before them, a new path waiting to be written. And Ethan knew this was only the beginning.